Bold Bull 1 is the final fight in the major circuit, and amongst speedrunners, his world record has had a reputation of being one of the most notorious and difficult to achieve. As with any world record, the level of execution required is usually one of the barriers that need to be broken, but this fight has had another key issue: just figuring out what is the best strategy. This fight has had many strategical overhauls that have led it to being one of the most confusing fights to understand. This is the history of the Bold Bull 1 world record. Back in the late 90s, speed strategies were in their infancy, a lot less refined than what you see in modern day runs. The first known world record for Bold Bull 1 was held by Martin Charlebois. Martin was one of the first people to document his fastest times and strategies, and his name is most remembered for his contributions to the Phase 1 strategy right here on Bold Bull 1. Martin begins the fight on full offense, intercepting 2 rolling jabs to get his first star. From here, he unleashes the star punches and continues to bank stars back to back. This goes until Bull is left with a sliver of health. Martin waits a fraction of a second for Bull's guard to drop and pops him in the face for the first knockdown. This phase is known as the 17-second knockdown, and to this day, it continues to be one of the most easy, fast, and reliable strategies to pull off. Phase 2 begins with another face punch into a rolling jab, this time getting a random star, followed by a delayed face jab getting a guaranteed star. A star punch is then used, followed by a face jab to intercept Bull's hook, getting another guaranteed star, followed by 2 more star punches intercepting 2 hooks. Finally, Bold Bull begins uppercutting and Martin just dodges and counters for the second knockdown, keeping 1 star in the bank for Phase 3. Martin waited for Bull's first hook and intercepted it to get another guaranteed star, followed by a star punch to intercept hook number 2. Martin uses his final star to intercept hook number 3, and just like the end of Phase 2, he dodges 2 uppercuts and counters his way to the first known sub 1 minute 10 TKO of Bold Bull 1. There are a lot of subtle maneuvers and punches happening extremely fast in this fight, and it's tricky to explain the entire mechanics without this becoming an in-depth tutorial, but there are a few things I want to point out. Firstly, star punches during this fight did a wide variety of damage. These ones in Phase 1 all did the maximum of 23, whilst in Phase 2 and 3, star punches dealt 16, 15, and even 11 damage. This all depends on exactly what Bull is doing in the moment before the star punch lands. Secondly, both Phases 2 and 3 ended with a lot of dodge and counter punches, which are very slow. Thirdly, there were times when Martin was able to manipulate Bull's guard to sneak punches through, such as the final punch in Phase 1 and the second punch in Phase 2. But later in the fight, he doesn't go for them and instead waits for Bull to make a move and then counterattack. The reasoning for this is that at the 30-second mark, Bull's guard speeds up to the point where he can adjust his guard on each frame, making it impossible to sneak in punches. Even though this is one of the first ever speed strategies known for Bold Bull 1, the fight required quite a bit of luck to get a time under 1 minute 10. In Phase 2, the first punch gave a random star, which is a 1 in 2. A little later, Bull chooses to perform a third hook, which is a 3 in 4 event, and getting a second uppercut is 9 in 16. In Phase 3, Bull needed to get up with his small refill, which is a 1 in 4. Bull threw a third hook again, which is another 3 in 4, and once again, Martin got a second uppercut to finish the fight, 9 in 16. The odds for this all to happen are about 1 in 45. Not too bad for a strategy that's nearly 25 years old. Martin's 109 would remain the fastest time for a while. Sometime before the end of 2002, another player by the name of Sean Zaffron would set a new world record with a time of 106 with no specified decimal. I can't find any information on what strategy he used, so unfortunately, I can't recreate what his fight might have looked like. Around this time, Red Tom began posting strategies to his website, and the first one posted for Bull 1 was titled The Barber Clear Cut, with a tagline, a strategy that pushed Bold Bull 1 to the edge of 1 minute round 1 TKO. There is then a detailed description of what is needed to be done for it to be pulled off. Red Tom's situation was different to most other punch-out runners of the time. Tom was from Europe, whilst most other notable runners were from North America, and before the modern era, Europeans weren't allowed to be record holders. Okay, I made that part up, but there was still something interesting here. You might be familiar with regional differences between versions of the same game. North America has the NTSC version, whilst Europe and Australia have the PAL version. The main difference between the two versions is the frame rate, with NTSC at 60 FPS and PAL at 50 FPS. The PAL version of Punch-Out plays quite a bit differently to the NTSC version, to the point where they are fundamentally not even the same game, and because of this, NTSC records are the only ones that have really been tracked. This will be a topic for a future video. Despite the differences, some strategies could be translated back and forth between versions, and the barber clear cut was one of them. On NTSC, however, the low wasn't a 1 minute flat, it was a 1:03, still very capable of getting the world record. Whether Red Tom performed legitimate attempts of this strategy on an NTSC console or emulator without save states is unknown, but from the research done, it doesn't seem like he ever held the world record for Bold Bull. In 2003, Matt Turk and Jack Wedge took a look at the barber clear-cut strategy, analysing it carefully. Phase 1 was unchanged from Martin's 109. For something as clean as the 17-second knockdown, this is a given. But Phase 2 irked both Matt and Jack. It began the same as Martin's, getting a random star on the first punch, a guaranteed star, and then landing an unstunned star punch for 16 damage. Then, things changed. Red Tom quick dodged both hooks 1 and 2 and landed 2 unstunned star punches for 23 damage apiece, dealing a huge amount of damage much earlier in Bull's pattern. Then, things took a turn for the worse. Tom had then relied on getting the 1 in 4 rolling jab pattern and getting another random star on the second jab. The odds for this fight were getting worse and worse, and then there was still the untold horrors of getting the Phase 3 low refill, another 1 in 4. Tom even acknowledged this. He was unsure if he could even call this a strategy anymore, since so much of it relied on cooperation from Bold Bull. It seems like back in the day, there was an emphasis on consistency as well as speed, but with Bold Bull, it seemed like you could only have one or the other. Either you get ridiculous luck and get a really fast time, or you use something more consistent, like Martin's strat, which was a 1 in 45 shot at a meager 109. Matt Turk and Jack Wedge didn't mind this though. They were interested in fast times, and they weren't going to let some unlikely as hell strat discourage them. Well, maybe it discouraged them a bit, because they both worked together to create an even better strategy, Bull's bludgeoning. The fatal flaw with the barber clear-cut was how unlikely it was to have everything work out, and Bull's bludgeoning rectified that with the added bonus of being a couple of seconds faster. The fight began the same way, Martin Charlebois' 17-second knockdown. The opening for Phase 2 also remained the same, grabbing 2 stars immediately and an immediate star for 16 damage. This time, they decide to intercept the first hook to re-grab a star, then dodge the second hook and star punch for max damage. Finally, they bank on the 75% hook and launch a star directly into it, dealing 15. With Bull at exactly 23 health, they quick dodge the first uppercut and land an unstunned star punch for the first knockdown at an insanely fast 36 seconds. This final star punch to finish Phase 2 is a bit of a doozy. If Bull decides to only perform a single uppercut, then the window for this star punch to deal the maximum 23 damage is 9 frames. But 9 in 16 attempts, he will go for a second uppercut, and that means you need to dodge absolutely frame perfectly to land the star punch, or else Bull will end up ducking for the second uppercut before he gets hit. Getting the low refill once again for Phase 3, they dodged and countered the first 2 hooks, performing 2 stuns and a delayed punch at the end to grab a star on each of them. This brought Bull to exactly 46 health, 2 max damage star punches away from the third knockdown. They quick dodged the third hook, landing a star, and then tried to perform another perfect quick dodge to land an unstunned star punch on the uppercut. The total odds for this fight were only 1 in 14, assuming they were perfect on both uppercuts. If they weren't, then it was only as bad as Martin's strategy at 1 in 45. The first person to pull this fight off was Matt Turk, sometime prior to July 2003. He finished with a final time of 101.25. The next logical step would be to try and bring Bull down with a sub 1 minute time, but this was not going to be an easy feat. Bold Bull 1 is one of the hardest fights to not only execute, but to even test strategies and practice on. The fastest way to fight him is to put in the Don Flamenco 1 code, fight your way all the way to Bull, and then you get one attempt to try something new, and when you lose, you have to fight Great Tiger all over again. This is a horrible combination because Bold Bull 1 is one of the most intricate fights in the game. Let's take a look at just the opening for Phase 2. All the strategies so far have gone with getting a random star, then guaranteed star, then landing a star punch while Bull is stationary. But what happens if we don't get the random star? Well, obviously this would be bad since we would have one less star punch we can use for big damage. But it's actually so much worse than this. If you don't get that random star, Bold Bull dodges the star punch that would normally land for 16 damage. There are hidden mechanics in the game that allow opponents to eventually dodge star punches. Even Glass Joe can do it. The order in which you get your stars and use them matter, and that's why getting this random star in this exact spot is just one small piece of solving that puzzle. Nevertheless, Matt and Jack were both looking to take Bold Bull to the next level, and that meant pushing him into the realm of sub 1 minute. For this, they would need an entirely new framework for the fight. Martin's 17-second Phase 1 looked sublime. Everything was buffered and free-flowing. But maybe that was the problem. There was no real work being put into that section, so they decided to put the work in, and they came up with the 18-second Phase 1. This Phase 1 was risky. After grabbing the first star, you would then try to sneak a punch through as Bull's guard dropped, and if you did this fast enough, you could land your star punch while Bull is still rolling his fists. This extra punch gives an opportunity for a random star. However, getting one wasn't enough. You had to sneak another punch through after getting the next guaranteed star to get a second random star. This allowed you to exit the phase with 2 stars in the bank instead of 1 at the cost of about 1.5 seconds. The risky part was that you needed both random stars. If you missed them, you would exit the phase with 0 stars, and if you only got 1, you would exit with only 1 while still losing a second and a half. So for this to be worthwhile, you needed both. And that meant the opening to this fight went from guaranteed to just a 1 in 4. Carrying an extra star into Phase 2 could make all the difference though, as less time would be wasted later to grab a star. I can't quite find a source on who invented this Phase 1, but it was all the hype, and it seemed like it was going to be the key to cracking Bull under 1 minute. But it wasn't. As much as Matt, Jack, and others tried, they could not figure out a way to make use of the extra star. Everything they tried could also be done with the 17-second Phase 1, and that meant they were wasting a second and a half for no reason. With the 18-second Phase 1 being a complete novelty, Jack Wedge reverted back to Martin's 17-second opening and began to look for new options. In the barber clear cut, Red Tom had landed 3 face punches into a 1 in 4 rolling jab pattern, and a final face punch to cap out the phase at 44 seconds with 3 stars. Jack knew this wasn't good enough, but with the fastest Phase 3 he knew, sub 1 minute was going to be possible if he was able to figure out how to carry 3 stars into Phase 3, and the clock was at worst a very low 43 seconds. And on the 18th of February 2004, Jack Wedge became the first person to go under 1 minute on Bold Bull 1. Here's how he did it. As usual, he opened with Martin's 17-second knockdown, and Phase 2 began the same as well, getting 2 stars, then an unstunned star punch for 16 damage. Jack then dodged and star punched on hook 1 for max damage, and then intercepted hook 2 to regain a quick star. He then brilliantly timed his next star punch into the first rolling jab, dealing max damage just like the rolling jabs in Phase 1. He picked up 2 more stars, 1 random, and with Bull at exactly 5 health, dodged the final hook and countered for the knockdown at 43 seconds with 3 stars in the bank. Jack opened Phase 3 with a buffered star punch. This one could have also been dodged if Jack hadn't done everything previously in the fight in order. He grabs a quick star from hook 1 and dodges and star punches hook 2 for max damage. A third star punch is then buffered into hook 3, cancelling it for 15 damage, and this starts the uppercut sooner. Finally, Jack caps off the fight attempting a frame-perfect dodge on the uppercut and hits the final star punch. The final time for this fight was just barely under 1 minute, at 59.82 seconds. The luck Jack needed to pull off this fight was by far the worst out of all the other fights in the mid-2000s. Assuming he would need to get extra lucky at the end because he didn't do a perfect quick dodge, the chance for this all to work was 1 in 195. I think it's likely Jack got lucky on that final star punch, as this strategy is capable of breaking into the 58-second territory with very tight execution. But because of how tedious this fight is to attempt, Jack wouldn't have been trying to squeeze out every frame. This would lead to a huge opportunity for Jack or anyone else to improve the record without changing or further complicating the strategy. But no one did. I guess people really didn't want to tediously fight Don, Hippo and Tiger over and over to put in the bold bull attempts, and so Jack's world record stood for a very long time. A little over 8 months after Jack's world record, the first ever tool-assisted speedrun of MTPO was published by Phil and Janisto. Aside from the most basic fights, every fight featured some new strategy and bold bull was one of these. As crazy as TASs can get, the best time Phil and Janisto could find was a 57.82, which was only about a half a second faster than the absolute limit for Jack Wedge's strategy. Phil and Janisto were able to make use of the 18-second knockdown, and this time, it was absolutely necessary for the route. Phase 2 involved sneaking an extra face punch in before the first hook, and also getting a 1 in 4 rolling jab hand whilst also landing an extra unstunned star punch just prior to getting a 37 knockdown with 1 star. On top of all of that, the end of the fight was an absolute nightmare. You needed to get the third hook, dodge and stun on the first uppercut, then hit a 2-frame face punch to get a star, into getting a second uppercut, and then attempt the frame perfect star punch. The odds for this fight were worse than Jack's at 1 in 300, and the execution required was brutal. For over 4 years, Jack's Bull 1 record was untouched, but it was eventually beaten by none other than Matt Turk. On November 18th, 2008, Turk made a post on Game FAQs detailing he had just beaten the Bold Bull 1 record by executing the TAS strategy. He mentions that this record was over 4 years in the making, and he had performed at least 1,000 attempts. Twice in the post, he states that the final time was a 57.99, just barely behind the theoretical best time of 57.82. Now, I realize many of you have watched Summoning Salt's video about Matt Turk's world records, and curiously, his Bold Bull time of 57.99 was later revised to be a 58.99. The reasoning for this is because 57.99 is not a valid time for this fight. The .99 decimal only lasts for a single frame, but on some numbers of whole seconds, it doesn't exist at all. The clock will go from .97 to .00, and 57 on Bold Bull 1 is one of them. Up until Summoning Salt did the research for his video, everyone believed 57.99 was once the world record for this fight, and upon asking Matt about it, it was explained that he simply misreported the time in the Game FAQs post. Remember, back in the day, almost all fights were not recorded because evidence or proof was not the priority it is seen as today. We only have old threads and word of mouth to go by. This might seem unsatisfying, but whatever you believe about the 1 second discrepancy is entirely up to you. As the 2010s rolled around, all of the old runners had moved on from the game, and we enter the era where Sinister 1 and Zalad 1 are rebuilding the Punch-Out community. The Bull 1 record stood at an apparent 57.99, just a handful of frames away from the TAS. Neither Sinister nor Zalad would be insane enough to try and beat this time with known strategies. They needed something new, and in late 2013, it came in the form of Mchazza's new TAS. This tool-assisted speedrun completely revolutionized and paved the way for so many of the modern strategies we use today, and what Mchazza did to the Bold Bull fight was shocking. Phil and Janisto had just ushered in the 18-second Phase 1, proving that carrying an extra star into Phase 2 was better. And now, Mchazza comes along and he just takes that all away by opening the fight with the simple and easy Martin Charlebois 17-second Phase 1. The opening for Phase 2 had also remained the same to old strategies. Get 2 stars, land an unstunned star punch, and then a star punch for max damage on the hook. The next punch, however, was incredible. In between hooks 1 and 2, Bold Bull has a tiny delay, and Mchazza managed to sneak a face punch in this tiny gap. To time this, you only have a 2-frame window, but you also need to make sure to raise Bull's guard prior to the first hook. And remember, Bull's guard speeds up at 30 seconds, and this punch lands at 29 on the clock. The rest of the fight plays out rather similarly to old strategies, with some minor speedy modifications, like these 2 frame-perfect star punches on 2 uppercuts to end the fight. Mchazza managed to save over 2.5 seconds on the theoretical best time, and the limit for Bold Bull was brought to 55.25 seconds. This entire strategy was quite difficult, as it had plenty of fundamental moves that made it particularly tricky, especially at the end. But on the other hand, the overall luck needed was twice as good, at only 1 in 150. Mchazza had shown that landing a single punch in this particular spot to get a star was completely changing the way Bold Bull was fought at the top level, and insanely, he had remade the 17-second phase 1 a contender for yet another world record. As good as this strategy was, no one would truly use it to beat the world record. Neither Sinister nor Zalad wanted to deal with trying to perfectly dodge 2 uppercuts at the end of the fight. Nearly 4 years earlier, Sinister 1 had set a PB of 101.97, using a slightly different Phase 3 strategy from a 45-second Phase 2. This Phase 3 was extremely beneficial. It involved only 1 uppercut at the end of the fight, meaning we wouldn't need the second random one, which meant the overall odds for the fight could just about be cut in half to 1 in 85. There was a tiny downside though. It was slower than the TAS Phase 3, but only by about 15 frames. Mchazza's Phase 2 was so good that with Sinister 1's Phase 3, the old TAS time of 57.82 could easily be taken down by a human, and the first person to prove that was Zalad 1. On June 22nd, 2014, Zalad managed to pull off this exact fight using Mchazza's Phase 2 and Sinister's Phase 3. He mentions that he had particular trouble hitting that 2-frame punch in between hooks 1 and 2, and more than 95% of his attempts that got past that first random star were lost on this punch. Towards the end of the fight, he played rather safely, which can easily be seen on this punch, where he could have countered much earlier. Nevertheless, Zalad completed this fight with a final time of 57 seconds flat. Zalad would only hold on to this world record for a little over a month. Punch-Out individual level specialist Brandon De Silva would set a new world record on July 27th using the exact same strategy but with cleaner execution, and upon getting the world record, Brandon would perform one of his trademark pop-offs.
Got it! World record! World record, baby! World record! What is it? What is it? What is it? 56.48. 56.48. Yeah!
The Bold Bull record was put on notice. Brandon and Zalad would have a bit of a heated rivalry over the Bold Bull record throughout the next year. Brandon's execution was vastly improved over Zalad's fight, but it itself wasn't perfect. Zalad would end up taking the record back in February of 2015 after about 350 attempts, once again using the exact same strategy but with slightly tighter execution, bringing the record down by a single time increment from 0.48 to 0.25. This battle was coming just down to who could save a couple more frames over the other person, whilst they weren't even using the fastest known strategy. The TAS Phase 3 was still in the back pocket of whoever was daring enough to use it. The odds to pull it off would jump back up to about 1 in 150, and it was also going to be significantly more difficult to execute. Just before Awesome Games Done Quick 2016, Zalad 1 would finally go for Bold Bull 1 supremacy and fully utilize the TAS strategy. After countless attempts, he finally got one all the way to the end of Phase 3, and this happened. Zalad had pulled off everything the strategy needed, except there was a single RNG check that had not gone his way. Bold Bull had gotten up with his large refill for Phase 3. If not for that, this would have undoubtedly been the first Bold Bull fight to go under 56 seconds. Now the history gets a bit murky. A photograph was uploaded by Brandon De Silva on an unknown date depicting a Bold Bull end fight screen with the final time of 56 seconds flat. Almost no one knew about this photograph existing, not even Zalad1 knew about it, and the first instance I can find of the photo even being mentioned was by Summoning Salt here in 2018. By the mid-2010s, it had become widely accepted amongst most speedrun communities that photographic evidence was just not going to cut it. However, the Punch-Out community had no reason to believe this was fake either. The record was now in a weird limbo state, with the best time on video being a 56.25, the best photo evidence being a 56 flat, and a fight that was missing a single RNG check that would have definitely been a 55. With the world record in a delicate balance, it's amazing it would not be conclusively improved again for over 5 years. After a long hiatus on December 31st, 2018, Mchazza returned to the Punch-Out community and revealed he was making another tool-assisted speedrun. It wasn't complete yet, but he hinted that one fight was definitely getting improved: Bold Bull 1. Knowing that there was now something new to find, I took it upon myself to figure out exactly what this improvement was going to be. In a few hours, I had come up with a new strat which garnered a final time of 54.25. When I showed Mchazza, he told me I got phase 3 right, but not phase 2, and I instantly knew that his route was even faster than this. Mchazza continued to drop cryptic clues on how to fix phase 2, and on New Year's Day, January 1st, 2019, I ended up piecing it all together and I figured out exactly what time Mchazza had managed to get. But I didn't show the other runners how it was done. All the other runners were aware of what phase 3 was supposed to look like, and phase 1 had once again been changed. The 18 with 2 stars was back. It was phase 2 that was the big mystery. This was Mchazza's fight, and we were all going to have to wait until Mchazza finally published his TAS. About a month before the TAS was published in May of 2020, Zalad1 accidentally stumbled into a slightly different phase 2. After grabbing the star at the start and landing a star punch, he cancelled Bold Bull's first hook by forcing him to block. Then, he performed a very specific guard manipulation during this star punch, which only deals a pitiful 11 damage. But the combination of the block and the guard manip allows something incredible. Zalad was able to land 2 consecutive buffered face punches to re-grab 2 stars, just before Bull's guard speeds up at 30 seconds. Because he got these 2 stars in this specific spot and all previous events, he was able to land 2 consecutive star punches back to back, which both landed before Bull's rolling jabs, where he was then able to counter them all to finish phase 2 with 3 stars at 40 seconds. Then, using the known Mchazza phase 3, he was able to find a fight that was able to get a final time of 53.82 seconds, and he published this onto his YouTube channel. This strategy's odds were horrendous. To get the 53, the fight required getting 4 random stars which were 1 in 2 each, required 2 rolling jab patterns which were 1 in 4 each, and the low refill from Bold Bull which was another 1 in 4. This all combined into a strategy that was only 1 in 1,024 to work. There was only one good thing. The world record didn't require all of this luck. If you got the large refill, you could simply buffer 1 more punch at the end of the fight to connect into a second rolling jab. This would cost about 1.5 seconds, but the rest of the fight would be so fast, it would still be capable of getting world record. With this knowledge, Brandon and Zalad would go hard at this world record, both using a double console setup to mitigate the downtime between attempts. On May 13th, 2020, it was Brandon De Silva who struck first by finishing the Bold Bull fight in 55.97 seconds. Unfortunately, he had not gotten the low refill for the final phase. Just 6 days later, on May 19th, Zalad would also complete the new Bold Bull strat, and he too, unfortunately, didn't get the low refill at the end of the fight, and consequently, ended up tying with Brandon, another 55.97. With all the hype surrounding Bold Bull, many other people were trying their hand at setting some sort of new personal best. The day after Zalad's fight, Summoning Salt, who was using the now outdated strategy that only required 1 in 85 odds, also managed to somehow tie the record, a third 55.97 in less than a week. During the creation of this three-way tie, Mchazza's task was finally published and we saw that the final time was 52.82 seconds, a full second faster than what Zalad's strategy could get. The adjustment to the task was subtle, but it made a massive difference. The 18-second phase 1 was very specific, purposefully losing a few frames to save 3 times as more back in the opening of phase 2. Next, he would also delay the first star punch to intercept the first hook, making the blocked punch redundant. The final punch before 30 seconds was a massive problem though. You needed to be holding up, release up on a specific frame, then repress up to perfectly time a face punch, and doing this would allow you to land 2 star punches 1 frame before the rolling jabs begin. With the odds for the whole thing to work at still less than 1 in 1,000, this one punch would deter everyone from trying to perform this strategy. 3 months after the three-way tie, Brandon De Silva would finally break it and finally pull off Zalad's strategy with the low refill at the end, and completely crushing the world record by nearly 2 seconds. The final time for this fight was 54 seconds flat, very close to the strategy's limit at 53.82.
Yeah!
Brandon would not be totally satisfied with this, and once again, grinded for the 1 in 1,024 luck. This time, he made sure his execution was even tighter than before, and he became the first person to crack the 54-second barrier and finish the fight with a final time of 53.97 seconds.
Got it! World record, baby! World record! Yeah! That's what I wanted. I wanted the 53. I got it. Hell yeah, baby. Hell yeah.
Brandon had nearly pushed Zalad's strategy to its limit. If he was going to take the time even lower, he would have to think about using the task strategy. The 1 frame up release punch was absolutely not going to be feasible with the abysmal luck required, but there was something else. It was possible to make the preceding punch a misdirected right gut punch, and then perform a regular face punch with exactly a 1 frame delay. This was able to keep Bull's move timer in the exact same place so everything could fit in before the rolling jabs. The price of this strategy was just a single frame due to a slower animation. And so, Brandon began his final grind for the fastest Bold Bull 1 time to put it as far out of reach as possible. To aid in his consistency, he also chose to make phase 1 faster than the TAS, so he could more safely execute the first star punch in phase 2, costing about 10 frames total. On the 26th of November 2021, Brandon got the 1 in 1,024 luck one final time and set a new world record of 53.25 seconds. And that is where the record still stands today.